Good morning. What you're going to see is a straightforward report on this morning's Webster. Could happen to you. You could be panic-stricken that you're about to face a rapist, at least a man who wants to get into your apartment. And what do the police tell you, as they did on this occasion? Very sorry, ma'am, we can't help you. We're in the middle of a change of shift and other calls of high priorities. True story this morning. And you're going to meet the woman and the deputy police chief giving their explanation for whatever it's worth. She was in her apartment at 6 o'clock in the morning. There is the bell at the door. A man wanted to come in, and here's what happened to her at the hands of the police, as she tells us.
This female police officer said, well, I'm sorry, but we just can't send anybody in the middle of a change of shifts, maybe later on sometime, you know, in an hour. She said perhaps sometime after 7. I said, that doesn't do me any good. I was petrified because I know there have been a lot of rapes in the city, especially in the West End where I live. As a matter of fact, just 2 weeks before that, a girl was raped and her body was dumped in front of an apartment, just 2 apartments down from where I live.
That's our true-to-life horror story this morning. My principal guest in the studio today may have another kind of horror story from his political viewpoint. He is the former finance minister and minister of agriculture in the NDP government. He is Dave Stupich, MLA for Nanaimo. And I want to talk to him about what's happening to our land freeze and the E.L.U.C. In addition this morning, you're going to meet briefly one half of Bennett's Stadium Task Force, the half which belongs to Paul Manning. And among other things, I put it to him, you know, when will we finally know and who will pick the stadium?
I would think that once we've got the 3 different proposals in, that we'll try and make the best and the most common sense proposal, combining the best of all of them, and come down. In the end, it's going to be up to the Premier and his colleagues to decide what they want to do.
Manning at the end of the program. And first, though, the true-to-life experiences of a Vancouver woman, single, living in the West End, who was recently absolutely terrified, and that was assisted by the lack of police action. That's immediate. Ask them how much I want into the film. The Community Relations Department of the Vancouver City Police has been telling women ad nauseam in recent months, because of the large number of rapes with people entering apartments without any considerable force, to call the police forthwith at once. Tell the police. Anything suspicious, tell the police. The experiences of this woman this morning belie the fact that you're going to get instant action. You will hear the woman. You'll hear a deputy chief of the Vancouver City Police giving his explanations. Then I'll tell you what I think. Brian.
It's a fact that more single women live in the West End of Vancouver than any other part in the city. There's been numerous attacks, reports of rape over the last couple of years. And police in turn have made just as many public appeals, asking for assistance. Please call immediately if anybody harasses you. So what happens when a woman at 6 o'clock in the morning gets a call on her apartment buzzer from a man who wants to get in? Turns out later, her call just wasn't high enough on the priority list.
I went and answered the buzzer and said, hello, who's there? And a man's voice said, lady, I just want to talk to you. So, of course, I didn't recognize the voice, so I just closed the intercom, went back to bed, and it just kept ringing again and again. And I didn't answer, of course. And about, I'd say, probably 10, 15 minutes later, when he wouldn't go away and kept ringing, I went and phoned the Vancouver City Police. And the police officer took down all the information. And
this is on the phone?
Yes, this is all on the phone. So I then went and started getting ready for work this time. And the fellow just kept buzzing. I'd say about every probably 3 minutes, 4 minutes, it would buzz.
You didn't answer?
No, and I didn't go near it again. And about another 15 minutes after that, I would say, the phone rang. So I thought, well, the police have probably now checked it out. So I went and answered, and it was police officer and said, "This is the Vancouver City Police calling. Sorry, but we can't come out and check this. We're just in the middle of a change of shifts." And I said, "Well, change of shifts or not," I said, "I have to go to work in about half an hour." And I said, "It doesn't sound like that fella's going to go away." I said, "He keeps ringing the buzzer all the time." And this police officer said, "Well, is he still there?" And I said, "Yes, it rang just as the phone rang, so he is still there." And this female police officer said, "Well, I'm sorry, but we just can't send anybody in the middle of a change of shifts. Maybe later on sometime, you know, in
That's what they
an
told you.
hour." She said, "Perhaps sometime after 7. I said, "That doesn't do me any good. By then I have to have been outside and have caught a bus and on my way
What time
to
would this
work."
be, around roughly
This-
6:30 or somewhere in there?
This may be 6:30 now or before 6:30.
And they told you they couldn't send anybody to investigate your complaint, a
No.
man buzzing your apartment,
No, because they were in the middle of changing shifts.
changing shifts.
Right.
They didn't give you any other explanation?
No,
it was just
that-
strictly
that
changing
was-
shifts, we can't come.
That was the reason for not coming out. I was petrified because I know there have been a lot of rapes in the city, especially in the West End where I live. As a matter of fact, just 2 weeks before that, a girl was raped and her body was dumped in front of an apartment, just 2 apartments down from where I live. This was sometime before 5, and I can still hear that girl yelling, "Help me, somebody, help me." And there were a lot of people that did go out there. And I stood at my window and I watched this because, of course, there was a lot of noise out there, and I saw her stumble across the street to this apartment block, and there was people had gone out, and the police came and the ambulance and the fire department came out there, and I heard this girl yelling and screaming, "Don't touch me, don't." She was just petrified. So I can sort of put myself in that situation, like if this would have happened to me. And so I know with all the rapes, I thought, well, maybe this is the same sick person out there. And I thought, well, maybe the police would appreciate some kind of a clue, you know, that I just cannot see why they wouldn't come out and check on something like this when it's right in the area where so much has been happening.
So what happened that morning 2 weeks ago in the West End? It was 6 a.m., and a man was ringing the apartment buzzer of the woman, telling her, "I just want to come in and talk to you." Her first thought, it could be a rapist. But Vancouver Police have their own version of what transpired during that hour, October 16th. Their taped transcripts of the telephone conversations indicate there were higher priority matters. Deputy Stewart, can we accept as a proper reason why police didn't respond in this particular situation is that there was a shift change, there just wasn't any cars available? I mean, that seems rather odd.
No, I wouldn't accept a simple shift change situation to be reason enough for us not to send a car. I think that, as in this case, where the complainant was advised that there was a shift change, but that our cars in the field were also tied up on other calls. And
She wasn't told about the shift change, though, until she called back, until she was called.
No, the
10 minutes
on the
later.
first occasion when she called, the call was taken, and the dispatcher would then attempt to find a unit to respond in a priority order. And once learning that there was no car available to send at that particular moment on that particular kind of call, then she would have been contacted. And I think it's quite appropriate that the communications operator should call back to the complainant and give some reasonable explanation why we haven't responded immediately. And in this particular case, there were 2 reasons given. One, that it was a shift change, and secondly, that our units in the field were responding to a call of higher priority in the West End. And I'm satisfied that that's reasonable under these circumstances. Now,
Well, when she was called the second time, she was asked on the phone, or this is what she tells me, "Is he still there?" And she said, "Yeah, he just buzzed." So obviously he was still there, but still. There was
well, that's
not-
quite correct, but let's bear in mind that all he's doing at this particular moment is harassing her by pushing her intercom, and if we have to weigh that off against a more emergent call in the same area, well, then it's obvious where our priorities would have to be. Unfortunately, we can't respond to every call we get within 2 or 3 minutes. It's just humanly impossible. We just don't have that kind of manpower, and so some judgment has to be made in the communications room as to which calls we will respond to and in which order.
Well, there was a rape 2 weeks before. A woman dumped off on the street just 2 apartment blocks down, screaming. This woman obviously thought, oh my God, he's back. She's a frightened woman.
I can appreciate her being concerned about someone ringing her doorbell at 6:30 in the morning. And I'm sure that the communication operators who are aware of the activities, the criminal activities in the city, would take that into consideration. And bear in mind that the communication operators are supervised by a chief dispatcher at all times, and if it was the judgment of the operator that a car should have been dispatched immediately, then we would have had to draw cars from other parts of the city. And in that case, of course, we would have to weigh off the idea of stripping the other part of the city from available police units as well. So it's all a question of priorities. And I'm concerned that the complainant in this case feels that we let her down. Certainly wasn't our intention to let her down, and certainly if we had all the manpower in the world, we could be there at a moment's notice.
There's been numerous situations, attacks on women, rapes in the West End over the last few months, period of months. What are we supposed to tell the women if they call for help and there's a shift change?
Well, I think you're generalizing now in that if someone simply calls for help, that means that they're being attacked or attack is imminent. If that was the case, had that been the case here, then I'm sure we would have been on the scene within minutes. But that was not the case. We simply had a call that someone was annoying the complainant by pushing her doorbell. She does not know, she cannot describe the man, she only knows that it's a male by the voice. And we don't know if that was the paper boy, the milkman, or the rapist at this point.
Well, the comment was, I want to come in and talk to you at 6 in the morning.
That's what the complainant says. And I have no reason to doubt her, but we also know that she didn't ask him who he was.
She's a frightened woman.
That may be so. I mean, you or I were not there, so we can only reflect upon the conversation that the complainant has given to us and the tape recording of her call. And from the report that I have from the communication operator, I would say that we responded in terms of our priorities.
Now, it was a situation where she was told, in addition to there being a shift change, there was other emergencies happening at that particular time. A B&E that was in progress?
Yes.
A few other things?
Yes.
Do you have enough men?
We never have enough men. And I don't know of any police department that does. I don't know that we could ever say that our objective would be to respond to all calls for service within 3 to 5 minutes. Certainly we target priority 1 calls in that category. And that would be something that was occurring right now.
In this particular incident, for that type of call, what is the rule of thumb?
Well, it would depend on the traffic, the amount of traffic in the communication center at that point in time. If there was nothing else happening, then obviously a call like this would be dispatched immediately.
So you're saying, based on the manpower you've got now, depending upon the emergency, that kind of call is always going to be a judgment call in the eyes of the operator, in terms of whether a car is
That's
set up?
quite correct. And the variables are the time of day, the section of the city, and the kinds of calls that we're getting. So it's a major task to balance all of those variables and provide the best service possible within the resources that we have.
Do you think initially, though, this woman's reason, the reason she was given, that there is a shift change, was not not a proper excuse for a lack of service?
Well, once again, I have to reiterate that if she was simply told that it was a shift change, that would be not acceptable in my view. But she was told that there was a shift change and that our units were not available because of other calls, and it was the communication operator that suggested to her that she call the manager of the building to seek assistance, or to anyone else in the building who she might know who might be able to render some assistance to her at that particular time. That was our suggestion to her. I think that indicates to us that we were concerned.
This morning. I hope she's watching this morning. The woman's story is obviously basically accurate. The only thing we didn't get from her first time round was that she'd also been told that apart from the shift change, there were higher priorities of calls. She was only being annoyed. She wasn't, in fact, being raped. She hadn't asked if it was the milkman or the paper boy. And she should call the manager. Well, this ain't very good, so let's go back and see what the woman says in the rest of her interview with Brian Coxford.
I just cannot see why they wouldn't come out and check on something like this when it's right in the area where so much has been happening. And not too long before that, I heard too of the rape case also about 6 streets over from where I live, where a guy was waiting for a girl right in the apartment building, not outside, but in the lobby. So I was scared to even go out of my suite. I was just petrified, but when the time came where it was time to go catch my bus, I went out there and I was just about in tears. I got into the elevator, and lucky enough, there was somebody else from the apartment going to work, and it was a man, and he was good enough to. When I explained to him, I said, I'm so scared to go out there. I think somebody's waiting for me. And he said, well, lady, I drive to work. If you like, I'll give you a ride to your bus stop, which he did, which I was really grateful for. But
What time are we at now? Around roughly 7 o'clock?
this is around 7.
Still
yes.
no police car there?
No.
So when you heard that voice on the intercom somewhere in the vicinity of 6 o'clock, your first thought was rape?
Yes, like I was sure that it was...
One of these nuts?
Yes, I really... Because like, what is somebody doing any time late at night? I can see it, at a decent hour, but when it's in the middle of the night or towards morning, what else? That's no time for somebody to making a social call, yeah. I was scared, like...
So you were thinking that there's
had
some nut out there,
Yeah.
I want to call the police and perhaps they can catch him or find out what it is. It might be this rapist on the loose.
Right. Like, and I wasn't just thinking of myself, like, what if he'd have got into that apartment block and maybe I would have, I wouldn't have opened my door, but how did I know that, because I wasn't answering my intercom, I didn't know perhaps he'd go buzz some other suite. And there's lots of girls in our apartment block that perhaps...
Lots of girls in the West End.
Lots of girls, right, in the West End. And, like, I'm sure whoever this person was had a problem if he goes around ringing doorbells trying to find out where a woman is living and just, like, what do you want into a woman's apartment at 6 in the morning to talk to somebody you don't know? That's, to me, the man probably had a problem, and I think the police...
And police should have responded, eh?
Should have responded. When that night, I phoned the city police and said how frustrated I was that I had complained that morning. I said I did get to work okay, thanks probably to the help of one of my neighbors that he drove me to the bus stop, but I said I did not like the way you handled that. And
What do you think of the way they handled it?
Well, I think it's just dreadful because, like, it seems so unfair that the police should wait till something drastic happens. Like if I'd have phoned and said I got raped, then they would have come, I know. But they want you to wait till the accident has happened, like they don't think of preventing it. Like this may have stopped some big incident. I don't know, like, I don't know if this fella perhaps broke into some other girl's apartment that morning, and maybe if they'd have... And I know, I read the newspapers and watch television. I know they've been showing sketches of the rapist they're looking for. Perhaps if they had come out that morning, they may have seen that car they're looking for, or a young man that fits the description,
It's just possible. It could have been the guy.
It is possible it wasn't that same person, but it is possible that it was, too.
You made a phone call later that evening. What did the police tell you then? You were just a lonely woman?
Well, yes, that's what he said. At first he said, well, they should have really come out. That wasn't a very good reason. We're in the middle of a change of shifts. But they said, there's an awful lot of lonely women out in the West End. And I said, I'm not a lonely old woman. I said, I don't have time to be getting up 6 in the morning phoning the police department. I said, this may, you know, be the story of some people, but it may not. Like, how can you assume that every woman is lonely and phones the police department just for somebody to talk to? And he said, well, that was true. He said, I'm sure it wasn't true in your case, but again, there are a lot of lonely women. This idea of, well, don't think it referred to your case. Well, if it didn't refer to my case, why didn't they come out?
You were pretty
check
frightened
it
at the time, eh?
Of course I was frightened. That's another thing, like, the police must have known that my call was genuine, that I was scared. Like, I was practically in tears. I could hardly talk to them. I'm still nervous about it when I think about it. And I'm scared to even go out after 6 now, you know, because I know the dangers in the West End. Like, and until the police, I guess, crack down and find some of these rapists that are flying all over the city, like, I don't think any woman is safe to walk the streets. I really think that when they get a call, and it might be, have something to do, I should say, about a rapist, you would think they would come out. Change your shifts or not, couldn't they have sent the car out? Couldn't some police officer have worked overtime that half hour to make?
That's not a good enough reason for you, a shift
No,
change.
it isn't. No, it's a very poor excuse. I just can't see that at all. Like, I mean, there was a whole hour, like I say, this was around 6, and I reported it shortly after 6, and I didn't leave the apartment till 7, and there was still no police there. If they came after, I don't know, after their change of shift, well, a lot of good that would have done me. I had to go outside before that, and I told them that. They knew that I had to leave before 7, about, you know, shortly before 7, and they should have, I think, checked that out. And they said, well, maybe you could, like...
An hour later is too late.
Yeah, an hour late is too late. In an hour, there can be an awful lot of things have gone wrong. Either I could have been attacked if I went out, or some other girl from my apartment block or across the street or something. I just don't think the police should take things like this so lightly. I mean, to me, a rapist or beating of women is just as serious a crime as breaking into some store, stealing things, or whatever the case may be. Like, it is a crime. It is a very serious crime, and I think the police should look at it very carefully and do their very best to protect the people of the city.
And all the police told you was there was a shift change, they haven't got the manpower to send out.
That was all. Yeah, there was no other reason why.
With all due respect to the police explanation, that is the basic excuse. There was a shift change, and there were calls of higher priorities. I myself cannot think of a higher priority than a call at 6:15 in the morning with a guy persistently pressing the buzzer from then till at least 6:32. Certainly she didn't ask if it was the milkman or the paperman. But the man standing down at the foot of that apartment block, and she was high up, could easily have walked in when somebody else come out, forced his way into her apartment and raped her. Goodness knows, you'd think we hadn't had a whole mess of rapes in Vancouver all over, because we have had. So the police in effect have confirmed her. Their explanation, in my view, is not good enough. I don't think the proper assessment was made of the priority of this type of call in this type of town, in this type of climate right now. And I might say, too, that if there was a shift change, somebody should have made a decision to hold somebody on overtime or taken them away from the P.N.E call, unless the actual suspect was in there. Surely there is more than one car in the West End of Vancouver at 6 o'clock in the morning. If there isn't, there's something far wrong with the team organization for the coverage of the inhabitants of the city. I don't intend to spread alarm and despondency, but this is a classic case where a reasonable woman acted reasonably at 6:15 in the morning, or shortly after 6 o'clock, and gets a call back later from the police, I believe at 6:32 precisely, telling her we're very sorry, we can't send anybody, we're in the middle of a shift change, and then perhaps mumbled something about higher priorities, which the woman didn't hear, and it's just as well, because what's she worrying about higher priorities? She thinks she's going to be raped. And then a policeman did arrive after she had left for work. She got safely out of the building. Supposing she hadn't got safely out of the building, supposing that guy was some freak skulking around in the morning, and I would suggest with all deference, and I have a great respect for the Vancouver City Police, that they'd better change their priorities, and even if it leads to wasted calls on women alone in the West End of Vancouver, on a rape call or a pestering call at odd times, a shift change must not avoid the sending of a police car instantly, even if only for a few moments. That guy could have been picked up. He was standing at the door there from shortly after 6 o'clock till certainly before the police came sometime around 7 o'clock. We have a very good police force. They're very well paid. They are not short of manpower. They are not short of equipment. One sometimes fear, however, that bureaucracy sets in happy, contented police departments who must be reminded from time to time that their top priority is not the protection of property, but the protection of individuals. Sorry I haven't got time to take phone calls on this morning. Perhaps it's just as well. My next guest is a deadly serious matter. What with the Social Credit Convention opening in Vancouver this week, I thought it would be highly appropriate and annoying and provocative to have Dave Stupich of the NDP on to tell us what he thinks, not so much of dirty tricks, I'll throw that in, but of the handling of the land freeze by the government which succeeded them. After this break. Dave Stupich is an old repertorial customer of mine. I suppose I should start lightly by saying, now that Dave has been given more or less a standing ovation, that's Dave Barrett we're talking about, by the Men's Canadian Club, do you plan to expel him from the party?
I certainly have no such plans. But
it's an unusual change of attitude, is it not?
Quite an unusual change, and particularly with respect to that question.
Okay, in other words, you've got the next election in your pocket if Bennett just keeps dropping all these boo-boos. Is that right?
Oh, I never take anything for granted in politics.
Why is Dave having such a low profile just now? Do you think he's just waiting for Social Credit to hang themselves?
I think they're doing a good job at that, but I don't know that Dave is taking a low profile. He's working very hard at traveling around the province, meetings. And
Question, Dave Stupich, how long have you been in politics?
I first ran in 1949. I was first elected in '63.
So that's
30 years
30 years in politics. The Dirty Tricks letters. Is this a major scandal, or is this a pathetic two-bit piece of chintziness which has got out of control and perhaps been blown beyond all reason by a media which looks for sensation?
Well, Jack, I suppose my first comment has to be that anything that reflects on politicians with my experience in politics is bad, and it distresses me. Secondly, the fact that the Social Credit have shown that there was an organized campaign to use the media or to misuse the media in this manner is bad, and I think it reflects on all of us. I'm sorry that it happened. You say, is it blown out of all proportion? I think not. I think it's something that should be brought to public attention so that it won't happen again.
Do you reckon this is now a major scandal?
I don't know that it's a major scandal yet. We won't know really until we find out how many other people are involved and how high up the ladder it goes. I'll remind you that with Nixon, it started with the plumbers.
So you do call it a Lettergate?
It could be.
And obviously it will play a major part in the NDP campaign in the next election?
Not necessarily. It'll depend on what happens between now and the next election. And we were going to talk about the Land Commission. I think that's far more important an issue as far as political issues are concerned. I think this campaign is something that will affect against the Social Credit as a party. But when it comes to issues in the campaign, then there are other things that will be much more important. All
right, why is you one of the original, if not the original architect, one of the original architects of the NDP concept of the land freeze, and we all remember that hiatus. What has Social Credit done which offends you, apart from their basic philosophy, which is against your form of socialization. But what have they done that really offends you and about which the public should be exorcised?
It's not a case of offending me, Jack, and I don't know why the public is particularly exorcised right now.
Are they exorcised?
I think they are. I think for what reason, I don't know. Why the Langley situation did get the public worked up the way they did, but certainly the letters to the editor and the press commentary on it would indicate to me that the public are exorcised. But the thing that I don't understand is why. Bennett, when he was leader of the opposition, said that he fully intended to take away the powers of the Land Commission. When he became premier, he reiterated his position with respect to agricultural land. When the old Land Commission, which was a very good group of people, picked because of their expertise, were fired and new ones appointed, whose main credentials seemed to be that they were members of the Social Credit Party, and two in particular had led the fight against the Agricultural Land Commission Act, and they were appointed to the commission. I'm sure the government expected them to quickly get rid of the agricultural land reserves, but even that didn't work. So finally they changed the legislation so that the politicians would have the right to interfere in every instance where anyone wants to appeal to them for help.
Are you saying to me, Dave Stupich, that even though they appointed people of what they thought was the correct political flavor or political attitude, that these people stuck to your principles?
When they were faced with the information that was coming to them from the staff and the Land Commission, they had to accept the relevance of the arguments, the importance of saving agricultural land, and they weren't prepared to do the bidding of the government.
All right, now, when you were in government, you set up the Land Commission, right?
Yes.
I forget who the chairman was at the time.
Well, Bill Lane was the first chairman.
Bill Lane. What appeal, when you finally put in appeal procedures...
Oh, no, that was in from the beginning. It was.
Let's not have
There were some minor changes. We won't argue.
All right. What appeal existed when you had finished tizzying up the ad?
Well, there were several appeals, but the main ones that are being talked about right now, there was an appeal if a regional district or a municipality, city, wanted to appeal a particular piece of land with respect to getting it out of the reserve or changing the use, they could appeal under Section 9.1.
To whom?
To the Cabinet.
To the Cabinet directly? In other words,
your
your appeal process, and it had to be approved by a regional district or a city council,
Yes.
was to the Cabinet?
Yes.
And the Cabinet then said yea or nay?
That's right. The Cabinet, in practice, would refer to the E.L.U.C for a recommendation.
What was the E.L.U.C under you?
Committee of Cabinet
A
Ministers.
Committee of Cabinet,
Oh,
okay.
yes. With the staff.
I've got that
For the
understood.
first time, we appointed a staff for the E.L.U.C. The E.L.U.C. was...
But that was a
W.A.C.
committee
Bennett.
of Cabinet.
W.A.C. Bennett established that, but then we gave them a staff to work with.
What change did the Social Credit make in the legislation which altered your appeal procedure?
It didn't alter that particular appeal procedure. That still exists, although why anybody would bother, I don't know. There was another provision, though, and that was that an individual who was appealing, if he were turned down by the Land Commission and yet had the support of at least 2 members out of 5 or 7 or whatever, minimum 5, maximum 7, if he were turned down but had the support of at least 2 commissioners, he could then appeal to the E.L.U.C, the Environment and Land Use Committee. Now, the Social Credit brought in another section to say that that person, if he can't get any support from the Land Commission at all, he's been turned down all the way along the line, he can appeal to the Minister of the Environment, who may, at his choice, refer it to the committee.
You're saying that they opened the door wide and said any dissatisfied landholder can go over the head of the Land Commission and the E.L.U.C and go straight to a Cabinet Minister?
Straight to the Cabinet
Is
Minister.
that what happened in the Langley case?
That's what happened in the Langley case. The Land Commission unanimously, even the so-creds, all so-creds on it, unanimously, except for the chairman, I'm sorry, in that case, unanimously opposed the deletion of that land from the land reserve.
So the man
went to the Minister of the Environment, Great Mayor.
And he took it out?
He took it up and he referred it to the Environment and Land Use Committee and said, here.
And they said it's out?
They said it's out.
And that E.L.U.C is a Social Credit Cabinet Committee?
That's right.
Webster and Dave Stupich, after this break. Dave Stupich, NDP, former Agriculture and former Finance Minister. This 626 acres at Langley, which at the moment is out of the land freeze, is that correct?
That's right, yes.
And was taken out after an appeal by a company directly to Rafe Mayer, who referred it to E.L.U.C.
That's right.
And do you seriously tell me that the Land Commission, as is now under Social Credit, unanimously refused first time round?
That's right.
Now, Mr. Bennett has...
Not the first time around, that was their last time.
All right.
They turned
Mr.
it back.
Bennett has taken certain action. Is it a proper action, or is it merely politically expedient, said he, to put word in your mouth? You'll tell me what the action is.
I can't tell you whether it's proper legally. He has asked the Environment Land Use Committee to take another look at it. I don't think it's quite that easy to put land back into the reserve once you've taken it out. But I'm sure he's reacting to the public pressure, and it comes up to the question you asked earlier, is the public exercised about this particular deletion? And I say yes, they are, and that's why the Premier is acting, because he is trying to put out the political fire.
In what way can Mr. Bennett actually, with his own powers, put that 626 acres back in if he so wishes?
By order in council, the Cabinet can make changes in the agricultural land reserves. It has that authority, in or out, or changing use, whatever. So the Cabinet could introduce an order in council to change the boundaries of the agricultural land reserve to re-include that 626 acres.
So therefore, if the E.L.U.C committee would come back saying, yeah, we made a political boo-boo, quietly...
If they get the message.
Well, they've obviously got the message already, haven't they?
Well, he's told them to meet again.
He's
He
told
wants
them to
their advice.
reconsider.
Yes.
And he can then just pass an order in council and whammo, it's back in the land
Yes.
freeze. But meanwhile, the Land Commission has been emasculated.
Well, the chairman felt it had gone so far that he resigned as chairman, and he's been with it from the beginning, not in that capacity, but
You're talking about Gary Runka?
Gary Runka. He was there as manager first, and when Bill Lane retired to go to other things, Gary had done such a good job that we made him chairman of the Land Commission.
If
And
you were back
he's been
in power...
tempted in the past, but this was just too much. He resigned.
I think it's a proper criticism to say, however, of your initial freeze, that freeze did include, on the maps you used, a lot of marginal lands that were properly taken out of the initial blanket whammo.
And we said at the time that for the period of 3 years or 4 years, there would be a fine-tuning of the reserves, when there would be opportunity for the Land Commission to look at making changes. We based it on some pretty rough information, the Canada Land Inventory that had been going on for some 15 years. We did the best we could with the information we had. We established the guidelines and said, now we'll start the fine-tuning process. But it was intended that that would be finished within 5 years. It was deliberately designed to allow for growth and expansion around communities for 5 years, to give them time to accommodate to this new idea and to look at other than agricultural land for growth beyond the 5-year period.
There was no, what about this land at Langley? Do you remember its classification, or do you accept the fact that it is potentially prime agricultural land?
I accept the fact that the staff of the Land Commission have looked at it and have recommended to the Commission that it stay in the Agricultural Land Reserve, and that the commissioners of the Land Commissioners have voted unanimously to keep it in. I accept that.
But you're dedicated from your party side. Is it not still a fact, however, that 626 acres, despite its potential, might be the very place to create some kind of industrial, whatever they call these things, park, to supply jobs and dollars to the economy of British Columbia, despite the fact that it's prime agricultural land?
I also accept the fact that the Central Valley Regional District, Fraser Valley Regional District, voted to keep this land in the Agricultural Land Reserve, secure in the knowledge that they had more than enough industrially zoned land on other than agricultural land to provide for the needs of industry within that regional district.
You're saying that there's other industrial land in there properly zoned which can be used?
It's not me that's saying it, it's the regional district that's saying it, that they had more than enough industrially zoned land.
Mind you, if I were to push you hard enough on a hypothetical case, you would probably agree that there might be a case sometime somewhere where there is no other properly zoned industrial land where you'd have to use farmland.
I might, but I'd find it hard, Jack, because if that farmland had previously been built on the day before, or the year before, or 10 years before, then you wouldn't even be looking at it from the point of view of another use. Now, it's only because it's farmland that people in general think we can look at that and develop it to some, quote, higher, end of quote, use.
More money in that use.
Exactly.
Richmond is one of our best agricultural areas.
Was. There's so little left.
Well, I'm told there's 334 acres, which the BC Land Commission rejected the plan of Gilmer Estates for industrial development, and that now the government's Environment and Land Use Committee is currently reviewing the company's appeal.
Yes.
Will you tell me, and I'm sure you will the E.L.U.C now just bring that out of the land freeze in Richmond?
I think they'll be inclined to delay a little while until the fire of the Langley decision dies down. But it's going to be very hard for Cabinet in view of the MLA from the Langley area, and I'm sure you know who he is.
What's his name again? Bob McClellan.
Bob McClellan.
Yes, yes.
No doubt he spoke to some of his Cabinet colleagues about the importance of going along with this particular deletion in Langley.
Oh, except he didn't vote in that at all.
He didn't vote in the committee.
I tackled him about the fact that one of his campaign workers, whose name is not at the tip of my tongue, was on it. And he said, look, I divorced myself from that. I did not vote in that. I declared I was in a potential conflict, or words to that effect.
And I'm sure his Cabinet colleagues had no idea what he wanted in that particular instance. But my point is, how about the MLA from the Richmond area now, another Cabinet minister? Is he going to be faced with a lot of political pressure to be able to accomplish what his fellow Cabinet colleague was able to accomplish in Langley, not by voting in an E.L.U.C meeting necessarily, but by persuading the fellow members of his Cabinet that this is important to him politically?
But McClellan did not persuade his fellow members, to my knowledge.
And I'm not saying that he did. I'm just simply saying that I'm sure that the fellow members of the E.L.U.C knew what Bob McClellan wanted in that situation.
And, well, I don't know what he wanted. He said he didn't touch it with a barge pole.
Okay.
All right, now you're suggesting that Nielsen's on a similar spot?
On a similar spot, yes. And Bennett will be in a similar spot in Kelowna.
Why?
Well, listen.
Just a minute. Before you tell me the Bennett spot in Kelowna,
Okay,
we'll take a
Richard.
break and come back with Dave Stupich. Dave Stupich, an enemy of social credit when it certainly comes to land management under the Act, correct?
That's right, but I say again, they're only doing what they promised to do,
In other words, we can expect them to smash the Land Commission in due course
unless we smash them first.
and put it back to unrestricted free enterprise.
Oh, that's what they would do, yes, that's what they would
After all, if I'm a farmer and I want to sell my land for capital gain, I'm going to go social credit all the way if I've no conscience.
Yes, and most of them did in the last election.
Well, there were other reasons for the last election apart from that, into which we will not go. Now, you said Mr. Bennett has a problem in Kelowna. What is that problem?
Well, I think he'll be under the same political pressure. There are two situations developing there. There's some 44,000 acres that's not in the Agricultural Land Reserve. It's rangeland, class 5 or worse. But the proposal is to divide this into ranchettes, which will effectively destroy it as far as cattle range is concerned. So the cattle ranchers are very upset about that one.
How, are you upset about it?
Of course I am, yes, Jack. I wished we had included it in the Agricultural Land Reserve.
At the very moment, I believe it's 10 and 20 acres, but somebody's trying to put it back to 160 acres.
Yes, but even that will destroy it from the point of view of cattle ranching.
Is
where
that privately owned, that 44,000 acres?
Oh, yes, it's privately owned land. To the best of my knowledge, it's all privately owned.
If you were in power, you wouldn't look at it.
If I were in power, I would listen to appeals to include that in the Agricultural Land Reserve. It's the one area where we didn't include rangeland as part of the Agricultural Land Reserve. It was one of the earliest ones, and our feeling then was that we should limit ourselves to classes 1 to 4. We didn't look at the need to support agriculture by including rangeland as part of the base. And after that, we did include rangeland.
You did, but you didn't include it all.
No, not all of it. And in that area, we didn't.
44,000 acres of rangeland. How will that embarrass?
I believe it's all out of the land reserve. But it's something that the agriculture community is very concerned about, and it's part of the principle of saving agricultural land, even though it's not in the reserve right now. And if that were cut up into small pieces, it's bad for agriculture. So it's part of the whole concept of saving agricultural land.
But it's not that good agricultural land.
No, but, well, it depends. It's good for cattle grazing.
That's
and
right.
We import a lot of our beef. The other situation in Kelowna, there is an application, I'm not sure at what stage it is at the moment, but to remove approximately 1,200 acres from the Agricultural Land Reserve within the city of Kelowna.
For whom?
It's a city that's really pushing this one. They want it for industrial development, commercial development.
Is that not logical from their tax burden point of view?
Every one of these is logical from that point of view, Jack. I'm saying from the point of view of agriculture, it is not logical. And in the Okanagan in particular, there's such a limited amount of land that is good for agriculture. It has to be where they can irrigate it, and the climate, all these things are so important. The fruit growing base is so important. We can't really lose much more fruit land or there won't be any more fruit.
You're saying there's 1,200 acres in various parcels is inside the city limits of Kelowna?
The city of Kelowna is a very large one. You'll recall that there was an amalgamation that Jim Lorimer persuaded or whatever, and the city of Kelowna is very large. And many cities have agricultural land within their boundaries.
You wouldn't allow that either?
I wouldn't personally. And
Well, what's the pressure, Mr. Bennett? Perhaps you could spell that out for me.
Well, people who want that land out will say, well, look, again, in other constituencies where we have social credit MLAs, we've been able to get substantial tracts of land out of the agricultural land reserve.
Vis-a-vis Langley.
Vis-a-vis Langley.
Vis-a-vis perhaps Richmond.
Perhaps Richmond, perhaps Chilliwack. Now, all these things are happening. People from Kelowna will say, well, if they can do it, surely the Premier of the province can get this land out for us. The City of Kelowna needs it because we need a tax base. And we don't need agriculture. Somebody else can support agriculture.
The basic difference between your land commission, apart from political and philosophical attitudes, and their operation is that they removed the regional district or the city council as the body through which one had to go for an appeal.
No, that's still available.
You can still go through that.
You can still go through that if you want to, but why bother?
In addition now, you don't have, you can sidestep that by going straight to Rafe Mayor.
That's right. You don't have to persuade anybody now.
Now, in Rafe Mayor's case in Kamloops, there's not a question of the E.L.U.C looking at the rangeland, because that's not in the freeze.
That's right. That's Kelowna.
Yeah.
No, you said
Oh,
Kamloops.
sorry, that's Kelowna. That's right, it's Kelowna and Vernon. My mistake. So what lies ahead?
What lies ahead, Jack? I think true to the promise and true to the words of W.A.C. Bennett, even, who said, wait, hold on to your land, the NDP will be defeated, and then a new social credit government will let you do whatever you want to do with your farmland.
Well, in that case, why is Bennett running for cover and telling the E.L.U.C to reconsider the 626 acres which they took out at Langley against the advice of the Land Commission?
Because he didn't anticipate the degree to which this idea would catch on in the community and the degree of public support. There was an organization, or a group of organizations met last week to react to this Langley decision, and they included a large number of organizations, including the BC Chamber of Commerce, including the United Church, which was fully in support of the Agricultural Land Commission right from the very beginning. They were one of the organizations that wrote to me in support.
And the BC Chamber of Commerce.
BC Chamber of Commerce, year after year, in their annual report, have had good things to say about the principle of saving farmland, except this year they changed. And I wrote to them and complained about that change. They said it's all right to save it, but it's important to consider other uses for farmland.
Dave Stupich, spokesman for the NDP, on land commissions or whatever. And with time for telephone calls to Dave Stupich immediately after this break. As Mr. Stupich will tell you, no doubt, it's much easier to be in opposition, isn't it?
No.
No.
I don't like being in opposition at all, Jack. You can't accomplish things.
You want the power.
We want to be able to do things like saving agricultural land. We can only complain about it now, and unless enough people complain directly to the Premier, there won't be much left by the time.
Go ahead to Mr. Stupich.
Morning, Jack.
Yep.
Mr. Stupich, I was just reading in the paper, Jack happened to mention that Richmond thing, and he said to you, well, that's farmland out in Richmond. You said, not anymore, there's none left. Why do they, even want to bother thinking about taking land like that when it's producing food?
I guess what I meant to say was I lived in Lulu Island some 33 years ago for a year, and there was a lot of farmland then. There's little left now in comparison to what there was. But what is there and what is good should be saved.
I've lived here 20 years, and I've watched this whole shopping center go up. I've seen it all go, and it's just pitiful.
It is pitiful.
How old are you, by the way?
24.
24. You ever voted?
Oh, yeah.
Oh.
I'm on Dave's side.
Well, that was obvious, but I just wondered if you were really a disinterested guy who is waking up to this problem, or if you're an old-time party member. Sam and Ann, go ahead, please.
Good morning. Speaking on this land business and so on, there's been a lot of good land in this area that was big fields being turned into the little wee chopped up piece of land in the regional district, and some good land in the municipality being all chopped up for just no reason at all. We used to grow a lot of crops right next to town, and now you can't grow anything down there because there's all little houses. And another thing that's quite a concern is this iridium mining business. These big holes are digging and leaving wide open. And no matter where you go or what you hear is there's somebody just tramping across the people's property and digging out these holes 8 feet or so square and up to 14 feet deep. And some places have just been leaving them wide open. And that's quite a concern as well.
That raises an interesting point. Are you aware of anything specific in salmon arm, Mr. Stupich, at all?
Not at the moment.
If you were returned to power, would you stop this free miner's license for $5, by which you can go onto anybody's land if they don't have the mineral rights and dig in holes for whatever?
Well, I think that under that legislation they are required to pay for any damages that are done and presumably to...
Is that federal or provincial?
That's provincial.
That's provincial legislation.
Resources, that's provincial.
Because Mr. Bennett told us he had no power to stop the uranium exploration people going on his land.
That could very well be the case right now legally. I don't know. But certainly they do have to pay for any damages, and...
It's a good thing and a bad thing?
I think it's a bad thing that they can do it without the knowledge of the owner. I think that the community as a whole has some right to find out about mineral resources, and there should be some opportunity for prospectors to...
With the landowner's approval?
With the landowner, well, not necessarily approval. But
prior knowledge?
Prior knowledge, at least.
From Aldergrove to Mr. Stupich.
Hello, Jack. Hello, Dave.
Yes.
Is it not true that this 626 acres of land was part of the land that was assembled in 1956 and 57, 58 by the BC Electric?
It could be.
And Grosvenor Lang Estates?
Pardon?
And Grosvenor Lang Estates?
I think the Grosvenor Lang was all bought by the Land Commission.
Oh.
All of the land that had been assembled by Grosvenor Lang, when we brought in the Land Commission Act, they recognized they weren't going to be able to do anything with it, so they sold it to the Land Commission. So I don't think it's part of the Grosvenor Lang, but it could be part of the BC Electric, did you say? BC Electric Assembly, I don't know.
A friend whose property was sold at that time, he lived in that area.
It could be.
Do you live in that area, caller?
Well, I'm south of that. I'm just a little bit up from the border, but I'm quite aware of that land. I've been here for 22 years, and I know the land that you're talking about.
And you want an industrial park there, don't you?
Well, let's put it this way, Jack. We have 1 or 2 members on the Greater Vancouver Regional District. Now, how the hell are they going to get anything put through when they have Abbotsford representatives there, Surrey representatives there? Those people want agricultural land taken out, and they're getting it out, or at least they're getting their industrial parks, eh? Now, Langley wants a bit of an industrial base, too. And that land isn't all that hot. Damn it, some of these people that want to farm, that think somebody should say that to farm it, they should be the ones to come out and farm it. I know I broke my spirit, you might say, on 20 acres of land here that was all bush. When I moved out here 22 years ago, the guys that I worked with in town, they thought I was a damn fool.
And were you a damn fool?
Well,
yes, you were.
possibly I was.
Anyway, I don't quite know where you stand on it. Just tell me, are you for Stupich or for social credit?
I think we should take it out.
Take it out. Thanks, sir. Stupich after the break. I like everything black. To Dave Stupich. Go ahead, please.
Yes, Mr. Stupich and Mr. Webster, I'm awfully nervous. I hope I can explain myself. I'm in Richmond. I've been here 35 years. And this land they talk about, I don't know, he said 320 acres.
Yep.
I just wish that Mr. Steves were there to answer. And I'm sure maybe Mr. Stupich might know. But we have industrial land already zoned. It's up for sale in Richmond that is not being picked up. And yet they want to turn this, which is beautiful farmland.
Well,
Well, yes, the Greater Vancouver Regional District says they have enough industrial land to last until the year 2000, so we don't need any more.
That people, the company that wants this farmland, they don't want to pay the price that the industrial land is for sale. They want to add to the inflation by getting this farmland cheaper.
it would appear, however, that the company, Gilmore Estates, has a legitimate reason to complain about the Land Commission's ruling.
And as for our
The
council,
Greater Vancouver Regional District had the land designated for industrial purposes 10 years ago. It's serviced property, although it's good farmland.
What I
That
wanna-
means that came under your freeze, despite the previous
That's right.
designation.
Oh, yes.
I understand that. Well, ma'am, you're for keeping the estates in agriculture regardless, is that right?
and not only that, it was only defeated by a very narrow margin, you know. I mean, if it ever comes up for vote again, it'll probably go through. I think you should get Mr. Steves on to fill you in on this.
I'm not Mr. Stupich. Kettle Valley.
Yes.
Where are you speaking from?
From my home in Turtle Valley.
Which valley?
Turtle Valley. We're 12 miles from Chase.
Turtle Valley.
Turtle Valley. We're 12 miles from
You had
Chase.
Oh, I've heard of it.
Yeah, go ahead then, sir.
Oh, regards to a subdivision in Turtle Valley by the name of Mr. Dubitz. It's agricultural land within the agricultural freeze. And I come up to the regional board, and in the regional board, they turned it down the first time. And then on the second time, they brought it back again.
How big is this piece of land?
Beg pardon?
How big is it?
It's 80 acre block.
Is it now built on?
There's not a thing on it. It's all bush.
When did it come out the freeze?
Well, they're supposed to be taking it out of the freeze now.
Well, maybe it should be out of the freeze. It was just bush up beside Chase, or do you have good farmland up there?
Well, the point is that I have agricultural land right alongside of it.
And you can't get yours out.
Well, I don't want to take mine out.
And you don't want the other one out.
No, I don't see why it should be took out when there's no divisions for water.
Is it out yet?
Well, it's supposed to be.
You don't know, though.
Well, I'll tell you what happened was
No.
that they brought it up to vote in the regional board again, and the Kamloops Council, to what I can understand, voted it in.
Well, no, it's too complicated for me. Perhaps Mr. Stupich might make a note of the land near Chase and look at it for some time in the future. Anyway, you don't want it out. And how much land have you got?
Definitely not.
How much have you got?
I got 444 acres. I got a ranch here.
And you farm cattle, do you?
Right.
Okay, boy, thanks for the information. How do you spell turtle?
Turtle Valley?
Yeah.
T-U-R-T-L-E.
T-U-R-T-L-E?
Right.
Sorry, I didn't know about you.
Can I just say, Jack, taking that land out weakens the case for holding in the adjoining land, and that's my concern about a lot of these exclusions.
My thanks to Dave Stupich, former Agriculture Minister for the NDP, bringing up to date on the Land Commission. Thanks, Dave. What does one half of a task force look like after a whirlwind trip around North America looking at stadia? Paul Manning, stadia? Is that the plural of stadiums?
You'd have to answer that.
Paul, a simple question. Having superficially read your press and reports and whatnot, can I make it as a safe bet that you and Larry Bell are committed to a downtown stadium with a roof for British Columbia?
No, not at all.
Why not?
Well, we haven't made any commitments to anything, and the first thing that we haven't got the proposals in from the various sites, so we don't know exactly what's coming forward there. The number one thing that we have to do is see how much money we've got from different sources, because you're not going to build it without knowing where the money's going to come from. And then everything else becomes trying to put a puzzle together. So there's no commitments to anything, although we were impressed with covered facilities, and we've been impressed with the argument that if you want to have a functional, multi-purpose facility that can expect to make its operating costs, then you're better off having it covered.
So really you're tending towards, in your recommendations, a covered stadium of some kind.
We've been impressed with what a covered stadium can do. that an uncovered stadium can't.
What can
We're
a
not
covered...
we're not leaning towards anything.
All right,
from
what
a-
can a covered stadium do that an uncovered stadium cannot?
You can book events other than sporting events years in advance. You can commit these times so that you have functions, whether it be a boat show, whether it be a rodeo with the trucking in the dirt, whether it be any number of things. But you know that on that date that it's not going to get rained out.
All right, when will you write your report?
Well, we had hoped to have it done by November 15th. Mr. Swangard's asked for an additional 5 days to get the P.N.E's proposal as finely honed as possible, and we've talked to the downtown group, and they would appreciate the extra 5 days, so I think we'll do that. Mayor Tunnen Coquitlam is ready to go ahead on Thursday, as originally said.
Okay, so that's November the 20th will really be your deadline for submitting your report.
We'll see how much we can get done with everything being in by Monday.
All right, now take me on your whirlwind tour, 6 stadiums in 6 days. Quite simple, and tell me where you went and the
Well,
basic facts about each stadium, including the cost of operation.
Well, cost of operation, well, you'd have to talk to Mr. Bell a little more about. It's been
Who
more
is
than-
Mr. Bell, by the way?
Larry Bell, thank the Lord, is the Deputy Minister of Housing, Parks, and Lands, and he's got a background in economics, he knows urban planning, and he has been a godsend in the work that we have to do. Before we went on this last one, I ducked out and went through Ottawa and saw John Fraser, and then into Montreal and talked with Judge Malouf, who's doing the inquiry into the cost of the Olympics, and then into Quebec City and saw Victor Goldblum, who was the provincial minister levered in at the last moment, if you want, to pull the Olympics together.
Who recently quit.
Who's recently resigned.
Just while we're on the subject of the Olympics, what was the cost of that stadium?
The stadium so far is $800 million.
Does that include the retractable roof?
The roof will be an additional, in today's dollars, without paying interest on it, an additional $157 million.
You are not about to recommend $957 million worth of stadium and roof for Vancouver.
Not if I wanted to stay long in this community.
Fair enough. Now, but you were impressed, and you'll tell me as you go through your various journeys, with the kind of roofs you saw on various, or at least one stadium in the States.
Well, we saw a number of different stadiums. What we tried to do when we started this is to first here get everybody getting their proposals together and to get some studies done, and we've had the cooperation of the GVRD and the different municipalities to...
How about Volrich and Swangard?
They've been very helpful.
Really?
And particularly Irwin, who we've got to remember has sat and done more thinking about stadiums than probably anyone else in this city, and he's been cooperative all the way down the line.
Well, now that we've patted Erwin on the back, tell me about the one purpose or the multi-purpose stadiums you saw which impressed you.
Well, we saw Pontiac, and Pontiac is the first fabric dome, and the state of the art has been advanced a bit, which they're going to do in Minneapolis, but it's a football-only facility, and with about 80,000 seats. It's you get a feeling of openness when you walk in there. We saw it at night and we saw it during the daytime, and it's an impressive structure.
When was it built?
About 3 or 4 years ago. I think
What did it
75. It'd be about 60 million in today's dollars, I think.
80,000 people.
80,000 people.
Okay, choose the next one. How about the Kingdome in Seattle?
Kingdome I saw last Sunday, and here again, I forget it'd be about 93 million in today's dollars, and we should be thinking now, quite frankly, in 1983 dollars.
Right.
Because we're not going to build it today. It's going to be built by 1983. The Kingdome is a very well-run facility. Ted Boesfield has got a good operation down there. They move things in and out quickly. They do a number of different events, including sports, and it's meant a great deal to the city of Seattle. Yeah. It's a very functional stadium.
Does it make money?
They will argue that it does. You talk to all of these operators, and they think that they can make their operating costs and keep up with the stadium. The problem is, can they ever repay the capital costs? And this is where you get into the different drains on
Does Seattle only do sports?
Oh, no. They have...
it's multi-purpose.
Multi-purpose, boat shows, trade shows, different things like that.
How about Kansas City?
Well, Kansas City is a dual facility. They have a football stadium here, and then 100 yards away they have Royal Stadium for the baseball. It's open. They had planned to have a roof that was on tracks that they could move back and forth, but they find that it was too expensive and too tough to do. It was built at a time when they were able to do the two things, and the first question I asked the people I met, could you do the same thing again today? And they said, no way. We were at the right place and the right time. If you were going to put up that kind of capital now, we'd have to combine them.
All in one. So
all in one.
What about New Orleans? It's described as a $163 million lavishly appointed Superdome.
Well, it's impressive to walk into it, and they have a great many functions. They also have a lot of extravagance in there. They've got 56,000 yards of carpeting that all they have is cigarette burns and 2 full-time cleaners to try and go around and do it. They have lighting facilities that instead of just having the tiered stadium or the seats, they've brought the ceilings down with mirrored and elaborate fixtures, and the bulbs, I think, are built by one company, a special bulb, special socket. They got a warehouse full of those bulbs, and they have to keep going back to the same company and getting them every year as the price goes up.
You ain't going to copy New Orleans very much in your recommendations.
No, there was a story down in New Orleans that the governor of New Orleans went over to look at the Astrodome in Houston and stood inside it and said, we're going to build something in New Orleans bigger than Texas. So big we're going to be able to fit your Astrodome inside it, and they did.
Yeah.
And they did.
Now, what about the Astrodome itself in Houston? That's supposed to be one of the pioneer ones, and I believe it's a first-class facility.
It's had some ownership problems in the sense that the original owner built the stadium or operated the stadium, then added a series of other complexes. He ran it as a one-man show out of his back pocket, had a heart attack, and they've had problems, but they've pulled it together and they've now got it under new ownership. Their problem with the Astrodome, and there it's air-conditioned, because in Houston you're not going to get people to attend functions in the summer unless it is air-conditioned, that they didn't allow for energy costs. And all of these stadiums that were built before the energy crunch have things they wish they'd done. And so any stadium that you build now, you're going to have to allow for the costs of energy. And Houston, I think, is spending about $2 million a year just
Perhaps
on
the
energy.
Minneapolis plans are the ones closest to what we're looking for.
Well, Minneapolis has gone about it in a very straightforward and public way, and I think we're trying to do the same thing, to let everybody know what we're seeing and what we're learning. Minneapolis had a commission that went through it for over a year. They sat down and they had a 4-3 vote on the site and a number of other problems, but they've basically got a covered multi-purpose football, baseball, soccer facility that's bare bones. The Vikings will be putting in any private boxes, and revenue will go to the operation of the stadium. Any sports team that wants offices in there or facilities will put them in themselves. And if the Vikings are worried about how the press feels, who usually gets fed and boozed up before every game, the teams will have to
You're
do that.
speaking about the sports fraternity, of course, in relation to Vancouver.
Very fine fellows, but there's a certain way that they're used to being treated down in the States, and Minneapolis is just saying if that treatment's going to happen, it's going to happen at the expense of the teams.
Who owns the Minneapolis? What's the ownership behind the Minneapolis plan?
I think it's a commissioner and operating authority. The money's being raised through bonds.
Municipal.
A group of businessmen put together $15 million worth of land and also ended up another $1 million to meet the Twins' requirements to move out of their stadium into it. So they've had a good community effort, but all the way along the line, they've had decisions made by one vote on crucial things, including in the legislature. They put a booze tax on to raise money on per drink served towards the stadium. And then when St. Paul didn't get it, they got upset, and so that was taken back, and now it's put on just for
Sounds just like Vancouver,
Round and
British
round
Columbia,
goes.
doesn't it?
Round and round
What will the
goes.
cost of the Minneapolis one be?
I think it'll be about $55 million when they get it finished. And the interesting thing that they're doing in Minneapolis is they've got a construction manager who walks in and takes a look at the plans, costs them out, puts up a bond to guarantee that he will make sure that stadium is built at that price and on time, and if there's an excess, he picks it up out of his own pocket.
A kind of Dr. Shrum with money.
Kind of a Dr. Shrum with money, but in essence, there's been so many public projects or public involvement in projects where the cost has been something
Escalated.
that's been embarrassing in the end. That it's an interesting method to follow. If someone says, "We'll build you your stadium at cost, at this cost, and on time, and guarantee it," I think it's something we should look at up here.
You have to get a free enterpriser with an awful lot of money to do that and give him a bonus if he finishes it ahead of schedule or under cost.
Well, we'll see. As I say, this is all loose and in the air now, and we just have to sit down and sort it out later.
Where was it you saw this fabric roof, which apparently took both your and Mr. Bell's imagination? I mean, could you
Well,
say
we were
100
impressed.
million?
Yeah, but we were impressed with the Kingdome, which is
Is that a
cement
fabric roof?
No, it's a cement roof. We were impressed with Arrowhead, which is an open air. But we asked the question of these people in the different places, and if they had any familiarity with our climate, would you build an uncovered stadium? And the unanimous answer was no. Not if you want to have a multi-purpose operating at a profit, or a chance to operate at a profit facility.
You have, however, concentrated really on multi-purpose sports facilities with a few incidentals thrown in. Is that correct?
No, I think that...
Does anything compare with the multiplex vision of Irwin Swangard?
Well,
The original vision.
The original vision. Well, Irwin is the president of the P.N.E. He has an operation out there that he's got to look to the future of, and the multiplex satisfied the best way of going about making the P.N.E. as viable as the P.N.E. wants to be.
But he's now accepted that he will be giving you a proposition for a stadium, right?
We'll see what his proposition when it comes in. See, what Irwin has said all the way along, that if there's another stadium that can be built, build it. Because you've got to get the operations of that stadium in addition to everything else.
Final question, though, but when you submit your report to the government, which you will do, by perhaps the middle or end of November...
As soon as possible, and we'd like to meet our deadline, but we'll see.
Will the government then be faced only with 3 options, or 4 options, your recommendations fitted into the plans as submitted by Swangard, Downtown, and Coquitlam?
I would think that once we've got the 3 different proposals in, that we'll try and make the best and the most common sense proposal, combining the best of all of them, and come down. In the end, it's going to be up to the Premier and his colleagues to decide what they want to do.
Including the financing?
Including the financing. Although there's some different financing. We don't have the bond capacity up here, but we do have the entire government. If you want, both the NDP and the social credit have put up $25 million. There's the availability of new lotto monies that are into the provinces. In some of the stadiums they've put on, in the States, they've put on a 10% tax on each ticket going in, so there is a user pay element towards the use of the stadium. There's been booze tax. There's been any number of things. So here again, you're looking at how can you create the most sensible proposal.
Do you think we'll see a stadium with a roof by 1983?
If we can find the money and it makes sense, I think so.
Yes, Linda.
Tomorrow we have a member of the Steelworkers Union, and he's going to be talking about the uranium mining.
We may have the art gallery thing ready, too, to go tomorrow.
Hopefully.
I'm against the move to the old courthouse. And don't forget, if you want to call the police, if you're afraid of being raped, try not to call them during a shift change at 6 o'clock in the morning. Good lesson this morning. 9 a.m. precisely.